and everyone said that all it was wit and humor, no depth. They were wrong. Brian, thank you. Seriously, you are an incredible individual. We're looking forward to the many years of success we know you're going to enjoy, and thank you for your investment here at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and in each one of us. Appreciate you a whole lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you.
At this time, I'd like to call on our committee vice chair, Albuquerque Mayor Tim Keller, to make some opening remarks. Mayor Keller.
Well, thank you so much, and good morning or good afternoon to some of you. It's great to be on this committee, and just also want to echo the praise for our president. Who would have thought, there are many tumultuous times over the 100 or so years. I forget, Tom told me exactly how old the Conference of Mayors is, but Brian, you've been president during, it's got to be one of the top 3 hardest times, I would imagine. And so just appreciate your leadership. Mr. Chairman, you've got great Zoom game as well with your background there. I noticed Mayor Whaley also very impressive. And so I think I would just say that, we're trying as hard as these times are to also try and make the most out of it. And I know some of us, whether it's through emergency powers or different things, even with our economy, trying to get out funds for small businesses, trying to do what we can to support, just industries that are completely decimated, like tourism. Big challenges for us ahead. I know right here in Albuquerque, we tried to push about 70 million of construction projects up and skipped the procurement code. So one of the emergency powers we used was to get rid of the procurement code for a while. And that's been really good in terms of economic impact. So I know it's different for every city, but for us, we're really clinging on to that as we see new buildings, community centers, and libraries popping up around town. Folks are saying, next year we're going to be able to enjoy these things, and it's providing a little bit of hope and a couple of thousand jobs for the city. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chairman. And I know we have lots of business to get through, and it's going to be a heavy lift going forward, of course, when we are able to meet again. As we think about recovery, most of us, I think, whether we're optimistic or pessimistic, I think it's going to be a long time. And it's a great leadership opportunity for everyone on this committee and the conference to share our best practices, as we always do, be there for each other, and try and lift up our cities out of what I think is going to be a tough recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Keller. Thank you so much, Mayor Keller. Before we consider our resolutions, I'd like to call on David Burns to provide us some technical guidance and tips on how to participate in our virtual meeting today.
All right, thank you, Chair. Sure you guys are sick of seeing me. You've seen me all week long, and so we're just about done with this third day, but just want to go over a little bit of the Zoom etiquette that we're doing here, and also to make sure that if there's a mayor who's still in attendee mode where we can't see you on video yet, if you want to do the little blue raise hand function in Zoom, we'll go ahead and pull you in so you can be a participating member of the committee. Otherwise, for our mayors who are on screen, it'd be great if you can just have your video on mute until you're ready to speak. And most importantly, for voting today, when the chair calls for yays, simply raise your hand visibly. We're not using the blue hand raising thing for this. And when they call for nays, the same thing. We're going to do a little show of hands. And if you're wanting to cast a no vote, or if you're wanting to co-sponsor a resolution, you can do both of those functions in the Conference of Mayors mobile app. So feel free to send me a chat if there are any issues. Otherwise, Godspeed, and we'll see you at the other side of this.
Thank you, David. Well, just as a reminder, under our rules for the committee process, only mayors who are members of the committee may vote on resolutions. And we must first consider the resolutions submitted before the May 27th deadline. And then after that, we'll consider any new resolutions. And a new resolution must first receive a 2/3 majority vote before it can be considered. So at this time, I'd like to ask members if there are any new resolutions that they would like to introduce.
Is this the point? I'm sorry, I'm not a member of this committee, but I think, is this the point where new resolutions are supposed to come in?
If you haven't previously submitted them, we have 2 that I know of new resolutions that were submitted. So Vice President Whaley, if you have a 3rd one to present, we would love for you to come in.
Well, I don't know, Mayor Williams, if mine is already on the 2 new with Mayor Shore, and I see Mayor Shore in this corner, but he's multitasking, so.
I think we can ask Mr. Jones to weigh in on that.
Well, if you're talking about the opportunity zones or the economic mobility
The
one,
mobility one. Thank you.
okay, yeah, those have already been received and they're
Great.
part of this discussion.
Okay, great. I just didn't want to miss my chance, Larry. Thank you.
I know, man.
And Larry,
Thank you,
likewise.
Vice President Whaley. We know you were going to be there.
Thank
All
you.
right. So we'll
Then
come
the-
back to that then.
Mayor?
Yes, correct.
Likewise to Larry, my American Breakthrough number 53 is also in the queue.
Yes.
It's in the chamber, Mayor. Yes,
All right, thank you all.
sure.
So those are our two new resolutions that we'll get to here in a minute. Are there any though that anybody has not previously submitted that want to bring forward now? Okay. So with that, let me again reiterate that mayors can add their names as a co-sponsor of any resolution through community.usmayors.org or directly in our mobile app until noon on Monday, June the 29th. And then using the same website or app, mayors also have until noon on Monday, June 29th to register a no vote on a resolution that passes in a standing committee. This option is only available to members of the standing committee in which the resolution passes and who are participating in this virtual meeting. We'll now turn to consideration of the proposed resolutions that were submitted before the deadline and were emailed to you. To save time, I'm proposing that we consider resolutions number 40, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, and 31 as a group. So according to the rules, any member has a right to set aside any of these resolutions for separate consideration, which would be debated and then put to a vote individually. So would any member like to have any of these resolutions considered separately? Okay. So I have been asked to set aside resolution number 45 in support of the SMART Act and resolution number 53, America Rise Together, for separate consideration. So unless there is an objection, we'll set these two resolutions aside for separate consideration. Any other resolutions to be pulled? Okay. So if there's no objection, we'll now entertain a motion and a second to approve the proposed resolutions with the exception of the two resolutions pulled for separate consideration.
Chairman Allen joins here. I move approval of the balance with the exception of resolution 45 and resolution 53.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, can you state the name?
Who
There
is the
this-
second?
Albuquerque, Mayor Keller.
Okay,
Thank you,
Thank
Mayor
you.
Keller. Appreciate it greatly. So then we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. Those opposed, well, let's leave them up just a minute to give them a chance to.
there are
Okay.
6 ayes.
Okay. And then those opposed, please vote no by raising your hand.
No opposition.
Okay. So motion passes. So next, we'll move to approval of pulled resolutions. And the question is now on the approval of the amendments to resolution number 45 in support of municipal assistance of recovery, or the SMART Act. The sponsors of this resolution are recommending several amendments, and copies were emailed to members yesterday. And I'm hoping everyone has had time to review the proposed changes. And is there any debate? Okay. Then hearing none, is there a motion and second to approve the amended resolution number 45?
I'd move adoption of that amended resolution.
Thank you, Mayor Keller. Do we have a second?
I second. Allen joins.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Those opposed say no and raise your hand.
It appears the ayes have it.
Okay, so the ayes have it and the resolution is approved. The question is now on the approval of the substitute for resolution number 53, America Rise Together. The sponsor of this resolution is recommending changing the title to An American Breakthrough and changing some of the language and several amendments. And we were not able to email all of these to the previously, but the substitute resolution is on the screen. And now I will ask the distinguished sponsor of this resolution, Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher, if he'd like to comment on the proposed changes. Mayor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the changing of this resolution fits in the category of the world is changing very quickly. As you all know, I'll be the president on July 1st. This is my third revision of my theme, which the first theme was written before the pandemic, then second one was written after the pandemic, and the third one now has been written with the pandemic, the March for Racial Justices and the economic recession. So the purpose of substituting America Rising Together, the second theme, with the third theme, American Breakthrough, is just to make sure that the conference is recognizing the final theme for the year here as we start July 1st, and that's entitled An American Breakthrough.
Any questions for Mayor Fisher?
I do have just one question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Just a question to Mayor Fisher. I support anything you propose, basically, but if you don't mind just kind of explaining the branding shift a little bit and why you felt Breakthrough was a better path to go on.
Also, before Tim goes on, I want to make a point that that's the wrong text for American Breakthrough. That's the old piece.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand this, and it doesn't wash with what I've got here. So, thank you, Mayor Whaley.
Staff could find that out. Yeah, all right, so I'll go ahead and explain it, Mayor Keller. The America Rising Together was the theme, coming out of the pandemic, or recognizing the pandemic world that we were in, which was a shared experience for America, and it was an aspiration that we all rise together out of this and recognize the inequity that the pandemic demonstrated in large lights to the country. We all knew it was there, but it certainly showcased it once again. But when the marches for racial justice began in our country, I felt like I needed to be much more direct and hard-hitting with the language. So instead of talking about issues like equity, I talk about dismantling systemic racism. Instead of talking about increasing opportunity incomes, I talk about eliminating poverty. And then also add in there much stronger sections about police community legitimacy and police reform. So I think this is a moment where we need a breakthrough as a country, several breakthroughs as a country. And I felt like the language needed to be much more direct and hard-hitting about the issues that we work with every day as mayors. And I hope and pray that America is ready to get more to the meat of the conversation and drop the politeness, which we need, but we need to really talk about these issues in a much more factual and historically accurate way. And so that's the overall theme that goes into American Breakthrough.
Any other questions for Mayor Fisher? Okay, then with that, I would like to make the motion for approval here of the amended resolution number 53, An American Breakthrough. And can we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, then those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
8 in favor.
Those opposed say no and raise your hand.
No opposition, so the motion is.
Mayor Fisher, thank you there, and I thank you for that clarification. I think it fits so well because all of us there, when we saw the murder of George Floyd, it immediately thought we have got to do something. It is an opportunity in time now for us to step through this door and to make a change and to have that breakthrough that we finally can have here to really take a big step in the fight against racial discrimination and the elimination of systemic racism. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next item of business is the approval of new resolutions. And the first new resolution is in promoting economic mobility among low and moderate income individuals and families. And this resolution calls on the President and Congress to fully fund in inflation-adjusted dollars domestic programs such as community development block grants, the Homes Block Grant Program, and workforce development. Now, according to our rules, 2/3 vote without debate is required to allow a new resolution to be considered. And those in favor of allowing the new resolution to be considered please raise your hand. And then those opposed, raise your hand. Larry, do we have 2/3?
Parliamentarian.
Larry, I believe your microphone might be muted. I didn't hear anything.
I was just saying that the resolution is still on the screen, so I wasn't able to see all of the vote.
Okay.
So would you raise your hands again?
Yes.
Six in favor.
Okay. Those opposed, please raise your hand.
No opposition.
Okay. So now we can then move to the question, which is the approval of the new resolution. They are promoting economic mobility among low and moderate individuals and families. And I'd like to call upon Vice President Nan Whaley.
Thank you, Mayor Williams, and appreciate this opportunity to talk about economic mobility. I'm really excited to get to co-sponsor this with Mayor Andy Shore from your committee. This is an issue, particularly in mid-sized cities, that we see a real challenge around people being able to have the ability to move out of poverty. And I want Andy to just talk some more about it, and appreciate him letting me piggyback on. Andy.
Well, thank you, Mayor Whaley. It's always fun when two Midwestern mayors get to come together, even if it's Ohio and Michigan, which is also unique. But economic mobility clearly is important through the whole country. You know, I know we're doing a lot of economic mobility work in my city. When you see people who have not been able to get ahead, have not been able to break that cycle of poverty, all the tools that are listed in this resolution, from CDBG to fines and fees and other things, those are things that we have to beat that keep people in poverty. So calling on Congress to fully fund CDBG, we know they tried to eliminate it a year or two ago, or reduce it a year or two ago, and it was beat on a bipartisan basis. We see a lot of these things that need to be done. So the conference calling on the president and Congress to fully fund federal urban domestic programs, to me, is tremendously important. So it's an honor to join our vice president and Mayor Whaley in this effort, and I hope the committee will approve it and the conference will approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Shore. Is there now a motion and a second to approve the economic mobility resolution?
Move adoption for approval.
We have
Second.
a motion.
Alan joins.
We have a motion and a second. Then all those in favor, say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Seven in favor.
Okay. Those opposed, say no and raise your hand.
No
The
opposition.
Okay, the ayes have it. Resolution is approved. Thank you, Mayor Whaley and Mayor Shore. The next new resolution is Opportunity Zones, which calls on Congress to improve the Opportunity Zone statute by strengthening the reporting requirements, extending the time for investing in opportunity zones, and supporting mayors with local technical assistance and capacity building. Those in favor of allowing this new resolution to be considered, please say aye and raise your hand. We may need to pull that off so we can count hands there, if we can see the screen before we do that. So right now, we need the support to be able to consider this resolution. So please raise your hand and say aye if you're willing to hear this resolution.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
6 in favor.
Okay, those opposed, please say no and raise your hand. Okay, thank you.
No opposition.
So there are 2/3 in the affirmative, sufficient enough for the resolution to be considered. And there, Mayor Shore, would you like to discuss the Opportunity Zone resolution?
Sure. Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I guess 2 for 2 here. As most of the people in this committee know, that opportunity zones has been something that the conference has been a strong proponent of for a while, since the bill was first passed. I think my first conference meeting as mayor, we had Senators Scott and Booker discussing this topic, and then we've had one or both of them with us several times. Leadership of the conference met with the Treasury Secretary to discuss the regulations, but we've also gone on record as a conference that we need more robust reporting requirements to be put in place in Treasury so we can evaluate the program and make sure it's really reaching low and moderate income neighborhoods and people. So that's what this resolution is about. We're calling on Congress to do that now. Our cities need all the help we can get in economic development, and Opportunity Zones is a great tool. I know we had approved one here in Lansing last week that our state strategic fund approved, and we're excited to have that get going. It's a great new economic opportunity. I appreciate being joined by Columbia Mayor Steve Benjamin, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, and Birmingham Mayor Randall Woodfin on this resolution, and I urge its adoption.
Thank you, Mayor Shore. Is there a motion and a second to approve the new Opportunity Zone resolution?
I'll move for adoption.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
Who's second?
Mayor joins.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
those who oppose, okay, so it passes. The ayes have it. Resolution is approved. That completes our action on resolutions. And now we'll turn to our distinguished panel of speakers. Since just about all of our cities are in the process of recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, we reached out to several of our committee members to see if they'd be willing to share their reopening and economic revitalization strategies. And we put together a great cross sections of mayors from different regions of our country. And they were asked to share with us the progress they are making as they reopen their local economies and recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And to kick things off, we'll hear from the great mayor of New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio. Mayor de Blasio.
Thank you so much, Mayor Williams. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your leadership. And I want to say a special thank you to Mayor Barnett. We appreciate you. You saw us through a really, really tough time in our history. And I'm only going to say nice things about you this time, Brian. I'm going to be a class act, okay? But now, seriously, I think we've all enjoyed Brian's leadership and his wit and his energy. And thank you, brother.
Thank you, Bill.
Everybody, look, I don't think even in our worst nightmares we could have imagined all of us going through all of this. I feel like we've been to hell and back. And on just healthcare alone, or just people losing their jobs, or just racial disparity, or just financial crisis, I mean, I can't even imagine how all this stuff got layered on top of each other in the space of 100 days. But that's what we've been through. And so to everyone, just appreciation to all of you for being the folks in this moment, in this time. Like, we didn't know our generation was going to be called to this, but we were. And I think mayors around the country and everyone here, held the line and showed tremendous strength under extraordinary circumstances. So a real thank you to all my colleagues. And just the sheer magnitude. I mean, I'm very sad to say my city was the epicenter of the COVID crisis for a long time. There was a point in March where we didn't have anywhere near enough testing, nor did anyone else here in this conference. But the testing we were doing was coming back 70% positive for COVID. Lately, we're doing a huge amount more testing all across our city. It's coming back 2% positive. So, we've been through every possible, up and down here, but thank God now we're experiencing something that's finally stabilizing and we're able to move forward. And what we have found, through a lot of trial and error, to say the least, but we realize, of course, the federal government that was not coming, the cavalry was not coming on testing. We found lots of ways to expand testing ourselves. That's helped immensely. Been really struck by how much people take reassurance from the antibody testing, so we're leaning in there more. Heavy emphasis on moving testing to the grassroots, community clinics, houses of worship, wherever it's easy for people. We've teamed up with urgent care centers, nonprofits and private centers. It's been very productive. So that has helped immensely. The face coverings have been a big X factor too. At first, we were not sure they'd make an impact. Now they appear to be making a very big impact. We ended up doing free face coverings everywhere we possibly could. In our mass transit, our parks, we've been giving them to small businesses as they open, so it's one less thing for them to have to hassle with. That's really helped. We're finding now, as we've gone through, the first 2 phases of reopening, people are starting to gain confidence. It's kind of, given the magnitude of what happened here, it's slow and steady, but it is picking up. We're seeing more and more people coming back to mass transit because some real stringent standards were put in place not to crowd our trains and our buses. A lot of cleaning, constant cleaning. We're doing outdoor dining. We're still not to the point where we can allow indoor dining at all, but we've been really aggressive about allowing outdoor dining. That started this week. It's been a huge success already. And we just said, whatever the rules were in the past, we're waiving all the rules. All you have to do is tell us you want to do it and you're in. You can use the sidewalks or part of the sidewalks around your restaurants. You can take up the curb and put tables there and put up dividers to keep you separated from the traffic. And people have really gotten into that. It's been really impressive. We've made it very simple. And then the other thing we've focused on is heavy test and trace approach. So in addition to a lot of free testing in a lot of places, we've hired a whole slew, thousands of, for the size of our place, over 8 million people, thousands of tracers. We're trying to make it real simple. If someone tests positive or someone's symptomatic, it's really easy to engage with the help they need. If they need to stay home, they need help getting food, medicine, whatever support, talking to a doctor, we're making that available. If they need to go to a hotel and separate from their family because there are a lot of people under one roof, we're making that available. And more and more that's picking up steam. So that heavy engagement, we saw this in some other parts of the world, the heavy engagement, sort of hands-on, user-friendly, everything will be there to support people, is really helping more and more people to connect with the test and trace effort. We're now in touch with thousands and thousands of people, and we're finding, we do believe it's helping them to stay isolated and not spread the disease. That's looking pretty good, long way to go. But the other thing I'll say is, we all, as was talked about in the resolutions, we're all dealing with these multiple crises. We're dealing with a huge disparity crisis. We're all looking down the barrel of structural and institutional racism and how to fix it. And one of the things we did here, we started a city commission based on what was done in South Africa years ago, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We started here a Racial Justice and Reconciliation Commission, not to talk, but to actually identify what structural racism looks like and tear it down and change our institutions, change our programs, change our funding, redistribute funding to folks who have not gotten their fair share. We're going to try and do that very aggressively. We all know, for all of us to do what we want to do, we have to keep fighting for that federal stimulus. And that has been on again, off again. I know I'm preaching to the converted, but there were times a few weeks ago, I thought it was a given and we were going to do pretty well. Now I don't have a clue if, how, when it's going to happen. I talked to Senator Schumer a few days back, and it's really gray on when and how we're going to get that stimulus. So I do think we all have to really, band together, Democrats and Republicans, and fight for it again, because if we're going to do the healthcare work, the economic reopening, and the work of addressing racial injustice, we're going to need that stimulus money and just to get back on our feet. Last thing I'll say, just to give you the magnitude of what we're facing here, and again, we were the epicenter. Everyone saw how bad it got here. We're now on top of all those other crises. I have a budget due on Tuesday. I know a lot of you, I think, have the same kind of fiscal year. A lot of our colleagues do, June 30. We are $1 billion short right now. trying to figure out with our labor union some kind of plan to address it, trying to see if our state could do something, but we're not getting very far with them. I had to announce today that if we cannot get support from somewhere, from our state borrowing power or federal stimulus or something, we unfortunately are looking at a huge number of layoffs, and it's a staggering number given what most governments have. We're talking about by the fall having to lay off 22,000 city workers. That's a stunning, painful, horrible number. And in the middle of a time when we've got over 1 million people unemployed in this city, since February, 1 million new unemployed, imagine having to do even more. But we are talking about 22,000 people could be laid off by the fall, every single city agency. I hate it. I know all of you who have to consider layoffs and furloughs hate it, but we're talking about cutting back city services when we need them the most, hurting our recovery, but we are just out of money. So I'm hoping and praying we can fight that back, work with labor and fight with all of you and get that stimulus. But I know we're all feeling it. One crisis just feeds the next. And I think, I'll finish by saying the best thing we have is each other. And this is my 7th year as a mayor, and it's the solidarity of mayors. I know Tom Cochran knows what I'm talking about, the solidarity between mayors and mayors, having each other's back, supporting each other, fighting in Washington together. It's one of the only things that's kept me sane. So I want to thank all of you for that, but we're going to have to, if we're going to avert in our city and so many others cutbacks and something that would stop our recovery, we're going to have to go to Washington harder than ever to get that stimulus. So that's my update, and thank you very much, Mayor, for the chance to offer a few words.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio. Next, we'll move to the outstanding mayor of Houston, Sylvester Turner. Mayor Turner.
Mayor, Mayor Turner had an emergency, so he will not be able to join us. As you know, he's had a lot of issues with COVID-19. It's on the increase. So I think he was pulled into a press conference on that. So he will not be able to be joining us.
Well, with
Mr.
that,
Chairman,
then I will.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, can I just make a comment following Mayor de Blasio's comment? And
Yes.
I see that incoming President Fisher's on the line. We on the emergency assistance that will be taking place here, we hope in July. Mayor Fisher has asked you and Mayor Nan Whaley and others to come forth with the strategy, and when we come together on June 30th. And this is very, very important, as Mayor de Blasio was saying, as we jokingly say, it's July or bust. And we are going to put the strength of this organization together. And Mayor Fisher, you might want to comment on this, because I know that you and I discussed it yesterday, how strongly you feel about it.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, as part of the American Breakthrough document, part of that is addressing police reform, dismantling systemic racism, ending poverty, economic recovery, and then coming out of the COVID-19 crisis, both from a health standpoint, but then from an economic standpoint as well. So basically, we got 4 to 5 weeks to get the job done right now. So Nan Whaley and her enjoyment of lobbying efforts like this, and deep bench on the Democratic side, and Mayor Williams with his knowledge of what's going on, his focus on the need for this as well, and on the Republican side of the aisle, are going to join together to make sure there are presidents of sales, if you will. And we're all salesmen in this effort here, so we're going to be lined up so that we can be advocating 24/7, pushing the right buttons both in our communities and around the country, so that we can make sure that the pressure is felt in DC and that the stakes are felt. We just heard what Bill de Blasio talked about, 22,000 jobs in a time when federal unemployment is in the 14 to 15% range, and the very folks that have helped us get through this pandemic. So we got to be able to put a face on these things. And the reality is, if Main Street is not healthy through local governments, then the economy is not going to be coming back. So I'm appreciative, Mayor Williams, of you and Mayor Whaley for stepping up to take on this responsibility and opportunity. And we're all going to be called into play here, mayors, to make sure we're getting it done both at the local level and the state level, particularly focusing obviously on the Republican side of the U.S. Senate.
It is an incredible opportunity that we need to take advantage of and don't need to let it slip away. And like you said, the next few weeks are very critical. I'll have some more remarks on that. And thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mayor Fisher, there for that. So I'm going to turn to the distinguished mayor from Winston-Salem. Mayor James Allen joins here to share with us what's going on in his city.
Thank you, Mayor Williams, and good afternoon, everyone. Winston-Salem is a city of about 250,000 folks in a metro area of 1.6. I've been honored to be the mayor here since 2001 and seen a lot of changes, but this has really been an interesting one. I told Mayor Williams earlier, it's kind of like flying an airplane while you're still building it there. But we started out slowly with the COVID here. I think we had our first case early in March, started growing. Got a call one morning. We have two very large medical centers here, one 16,000 employees and one about 11,000. Both of the heads of that called me jointly and said, Mayor, we need to take some action now, or we're going to have people dying here without our ability to take care of them. So I put in place a stay-at-home order effective March 27th, as did a number of other mayors in North Carolina. And Tom, here's another example of mayors taking the lead. Our governor had not put in place a stay-at-home order. He did come along about a week later and put a statewide effort in place. When that happened, of course, we immediately saw economic impact to displacement of hospitality workers and restaurants and so on. So I challenged our city council for us to get involved. I put out $1 million challenge to the community to match our dollars that would go towards helping individuals who have been displaced and things of that nature. We actually raised another $2.4 million from the private sector here. So we had almost $3.5 million that we gave out to local nonprofits to help with that. As we began moving towards the reopening side of things, we had a Mask the City effort here. We had a special mask that was designed by a couple of doctors at our local medical center. And we put it together and did a quick pivot with a local company who actually is a sock manufacturer, is now making these masks. And we provided 390,000 masks to citizens in Winston-Salem with a special emphasis on about 65,000 to individuals who were disadvantaged, lower income individuals who perhaps couldn't afford it, as well as a special push on our senior citizens there. In the meanwhile, as we're moving out, we put together 3 assistance program for small businesses, and particularly, I think, as Mayor Blasio mentioned, we gave training to these businesses as they're beginning to reopen, and if they successfully handled the training, we gave 2 masks to each one of their cities, their employees going forward. Our budget, back in January, we had it pretty well balanced. It was a humming year, good tax revenues, good sales tax revenues, good hotel occupancy tax revenues. But as we then moved into the actual time for the budget, we saw ourselves with about a $13 million gap out of a $460 million budget. We were able to cobble together a number of sources to balance the budget. We were fortunate to have an economic development deal that I did years ago that came to fruition, and we got paid off for that at right at $4 million. So we put that towards the balancing budget, but we did have to dip into our reserves more than we would normally like to. We eliminated about 20 positions in our budget, but we're able to balance the budget with no tax increase and no loss of services there. We did take some other actions to help some of our small businesses by suspending payments on our small business loan program, as well as a number of our housing loans. We suspended those and also put into forbearance the big lease payments for our large baseball stadium here. So our city staff is still working from home for the most part, other than those folks who are out on the front lines, but we're getting through that. Relative to the certainly the civil unrest, we've had a protest here every day since Mr. Floyd's murder. And I will have to say they've been all very peaceful, and we've just been really pleased with how the protesters have worked with us and with our police department. I think it's because we were acting prophylactically years ago to create trust among the citizens and the city government. So we're feeling pretty good about that. I just got off a call with the governor. The governor just put in place a mandatory statewide masking program, facial covering program that starts tomorrow at 5. I was getting ready to do it tomorrow if he had not done that, and I think that will prove some good results for us. He's keeping us at phase 2 in terms of reopening because our numbers are spiking pretty hard here in North Carolina, but we're getting through it pretty well, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share our Winston-Salem story.
Thank you, Mayor Joines. Appreciate the work that you're doing there in Winston-Salem, and it gives all of us great ideas here of what we can be doing in our community. I'm going to close out the mayor's panel by sharing with you about what's going on in Arlington, Texas, and I need to start probably with who is Arlington. You know, most of you know that we're home to the Dallas Cowboys and AT&T Stadium and Major League Baseball's Texas Rangers, and home to the original and most successful Six Flags amusement park. But you probably didn't know that we are home to the most productive General Motors manufacturing plant in the world and the largest esports arena in the country. And we will be the future home of the National Medal of Honor Museum. And then one of our greatest assets is that we're home to the largest university in the UT system, the University of Texas at Arlington, which has 56,000 students. And is in the top 5 of international students. And over the years, many of our international students have fallen in love with our city and have sent for their families and stayed here in Arlington. So we have grown to a population of 400,000, and we are the 46th largest city in the nation. But mayors, we are at a crossroads right now, a time in which, of course, we've got to take a leadership role in jumpstarting our economy, as nobody else is going to do it for us. And of course, we've got to jumpstart our economy while fighting the virus and also fighting racial discrimination at the same time. These are all key components to the overall health and success of each of our communities. And then when you start boiling it down to economic development, make no mistake, businesses have already added to their site selection criteria to choose cities that are not only dealing well with the virus right now, but also can prevent future outbreaks of infectious disease for a clean, healthy community for decades to come. And then additionally, another criteria that has grown in importance is the businesses are looking for a city that has unity, equality, and acceptance that exist among the citizens of their communities. And then, of course, also looking at an equity plan that is truly being worked on every day, especially with the mayor and council leading the way. In my city here in Arlington, Texas, I've formed an economic recovery task force like many of you have. It's made up of 40 very diverse citizens from different industry clusters. But one of the first ideas coming out of that task force was that we need to become one of the cleanest and healthiest cities in America and then market it. You know, our marketing team has chosen the name Arlington Strong for this initiative, and we are looking at obtaining national and international certifications to legitimize this initiative. You know, it's interesting. I was talking with Mayor Fisher before we started. Our city was enjoying the greatest economic prosperity ever in our history, and we had always bragged about we were recession proof. And we had made it through the Great Recession of '09, and our tourism had helped us there in it. Now we are not pandemic proof. And in fact, our city really came to a halt there in April. It was amazing there how many places it had affected. And so as we move back and we look at adding a very strong tourism to our economy, we've got to work hard on becoming clean and healthy so that tourists will feel safe in coming to our city. I hope you can relate because so many of you are working on the same thing. We also have an emergency operations department in which we are developing permanent rapid response teams to isolate and test to avoid future outbreaks of this next virus. And we are also going to keep our PPE stocked and continue to work with our hospitals so they are ready to increase capacity as needed, not just for this virus, but for the next virus. You know, critical components for any city, and especially a community where tourism is a major part, is being able to fight the virus, and then of course also to give the confidence that we're a clean, healthy city. And then in regards to equity and justice, I've created what actually one of our African-American councils wanted to call a unity council. It's charged with looking at all aspects of our city and to develop an equity plan and it is comprehensive, looking at everything possible. But while they are getting ramped up, our council has taken a leadership role to go ahead immediately to work with our police department on every way to improve our department, especially for the safety of our Black citizens. We immediately had our department go through the 8 can't wait. We had 1 policy adjustment. The other 2 we just had to write in, so we achieved the 8 can't wait. But we also stepped back to the Obama's task force, of which our police department was one of 15 departments that was chosen to work on that. And we said, look, we need to go back over those 59 recommendations and see what we can do better out of that. Those were all immediate things that we could be doing. In addition to that, we have created many community forums there so that we can be hearing from our citizens. We've also had telephone town halls, remote Zoom meetings with leaders here in the midst of the pandemic. Trying to create those forums has been really challenging, but a very necessary thing. In addition to that, in 2017, we started a kindness initiative here, really patterned after Mayor Fisher's compassion campaign and Anaheim's kindness campaign. It has been hugely successful, and we are now expanding that because the ultimate goal is unity in our community, which is so critical for so many reasons. So in the midst of these crises that we have, all the normal activities have got to continue, including our economic development. But however, these are baselines for not only economic development, but for our city to actually be able to be successful. And I want to mention too that I really do believe that we are at a critical time in which a lot of hardened hearts have melted, and barriers that were there are not there now, so that we can step through this opportunity there to really take some major steps in fighting racial discrimination at every level. Now, in closing, I want to share with you that we're all wanting to rebound quickly, as quick as we can. We don't know what that means, but I definitely believe that we have an opportunity here with the next CARES Act to be able to rebound quicker if we are able to receive revenue, or I should say resources from the CARES Act to help us with our revenue loss, because it is a direct result of a natural disaster, this virus, just like a hurricane, tornado, earthquake. And yet we need to be able to help our businesses and our citizens, and we don't need to be crippled as we come out of this pandemic. In addition to that, I think it's very important that we get every dollar we can for our businesses. So between the revenue loss and our businesses, it's very important that we come away with dollars to help us to rebound quickly here and to be able to pivot and continue on what was great economic prosperity. Well, it's going to take each and every one of us. And isn't it amazing how just a little bit of money for many of our small businesses will make the difference on whether they make it or not? Also, a little bit of money for us in our cities can make all the difference too in the world. I'll share with you a story of one of our longtime restaurateurs. Is a guy named Randy Ford with Jay Gilligan's. He has become nationally famous for his Irish nachos, but he is a small mom and pop restaurant, bar and grill right here in downtown Arlington. And he is known as the hardest working man in Arlington. And when this pandemic hit, we had to go and visit with him and share with him that we were going to have to close down the restaurants. And of course, it was right before St. Patrick's Day, which is his biggest weekend of the year. And he said, I don't know if I can make it. If you guys shut me down, I may have to go out of business. Well, this is a 40-year-old institution here in our city, and it was breaking our hearts, but we had to pay attention to the safety of our citizens. Well, after the council meeting, I grabbed my city manager and we went over to visit with him. Well, he had pivoted. Randy had created a makeshift drive-through, in which he wasn't even a drive-through restaurant. He was a sit-down restaurant. He had created a drive-through, curbside pickup, and he had already advertised it on social media, and he had 60 cars lined up in that drive-through. He had made it there, and now, though, he has not been able to recover fully, and he is definitely one of those guys that needs our help. You know, I know many of you have businesses and people that need help, and we need to be able to do it and don't need to be crippled. We definitely don't need to be cutting our services and definitely don't need to be cutting public safety. This is not a handout or a bailout. This CARES Act is strictly trying to help our economy so we can help our people. We're going to need your help here in all areas here as we move forward in a very critical 6 weeks so we can rebound quickly. So with that, I thank you for each one of you as you continue to work hard to make a difference there in your city. I'd now like to turn to Aruna Kalaman, the Tax Counsel and Staff Director of the House Ways and Means Subcommittee on Select Revenue Measures. She is here to provide us a legislative update on emergency fiscal relief for state and local governments. And Aruna, I want to thank you because the House Ways and Means Committee has been so attuned to the needs here and very appreciative. Aruna?
Thank you so much, Mr. Williams. Actually, last year, before any of this started, I met with your deputy mayor up in Washington. So believe it or not, we had a long discussion about opportunity zones and bond financing going all the way back to then. First, I want to say thank you so much to the Conference of Mayors for inviting me to join you today. By way of my background, I've been on Capitol Hill as a staffer for 21 years. And through that period, I've actually had the, I don't know if you'd call it the displeasure or pleasure, of working on 3 major economic recessions. First, 9/11, after that, the Great Recession of 2008-9, and now this COVID-19 recession. I think it would be an understatement to say that all of these are particularly unique and different and require different sort of responses from the federal government. Of my 21 years, I've spent 19 and a half of them on the Ways and Means Committee, which has an exceedingly broad jurisdiction. One of the interesting things that's happened so far is of the legislation that has passed into law or has been proposed or passed by the House, 60% of the relief is within our committee's jurisdiction. And our members have a very broad geographical representation in terms of what our country's needs are, and really have their finger on the pulse of what states and localities are facing. Very early on in the pandemic, my subcommittee chairman, Chairman Mike Thompson of California, we started setting up stakeholder calls from various sectors of the economy to speak with the Select Revenue Measures Subcommittee Democrats. One of the first calls we did was with state and local officials. Larry Jones was extremely helpful in setting that up, and we were very excited to have Mayor Whaley join us on that. And even back then, so I'll be honest, this is before the first set of unemployment numbers came out. You knew things were bad, you knew things were slowing down, and we had a broad discussion of what exactly the stresses were that states and localities were facing, including on sort of public facilities, things like nursing homes, funeral homes, mortuaries, coroners. Probably most importantly, and the issue that has probably been exacerbated even more, the precipitous drop in revenues. That's both as a result of coupling with the federal tax deadlines, but also just reduced economic activity. That's reduced sales taxes, reduced fees, things like that. In some areas, we're understanding that it's as much as 40% a reduction of revenues. So we're acutely attuned to what is going on, and to something that Mayor Williams mentioned earlier. Don't ever underestimate how loud your voice is. We always jokingly say the reason why the mayors have a megaphone is, God bless, every single elected official has a mayor, at least one, maybe several in their district. So please, now is the time to sort of come and make the asks for your communities, because I think every member knows it's important. For sake of, I don't want to be accused of practicing without a license. I work for the Ways and Means Committee, but the lion's share of the help in the HEROES Act, which the House most recently passed in late May, the state and local help is in the Appropriations Committee. So I'll do a brief overview. Basically, everything is sort of divided up into, stuff, funds that are ready for immediate disbursement, that's within 30 days after date of enactment, and then a similar set of funds to be used in a period of approximately 1 year after date of enactment. There's allocations based on equal allocation by state, by the number of COVID cases, by state population, and then the year-long look back, a state allocation coupled with what unemployment looks like by state. Localities, allocations are done by a modified CDBG formula and then by population. For the following year's funds, it is following the same formula, and you'll have again a year to use that. Beyond that, we do approximately, the total for localities is, for states is 500 billion over the immediate plus the year to come. Localities is 375 billion. And then we have $20 billion set aside for territories and $20 billion for tribes. This is an important and meaningful investment that needs to be made in terms of ensuring that the front line of caring for our communities has the adequate resources they need to provide that care. Beyond that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the Ways and Means Committee has done and will be doing in the coming weeks. In the HEROES Act, we did provide an extension through the end of this year of the additional $600 per week unemployment compensation. It's a very critical piece that's incredibly important, especially given that the public health dangers are not really out of the way. Not to mention that so many of the vulnerable working populations that we hear from it really feels like they're on the margin or on the cliff, and you're really keeping people out of poverty. In addition to that, we have an additional round of the economic impact payments, which I think will go a long way to help bridging needs. We also have an extension of very important refundable tax credits. So this is a bill that our members feel strongly about and care strongly about. And we're hoping that the Senate will eventually look to the HEROES Act as the basis. I'd like to speak very briefly for a moment about a piece of legislation that the House is set up to vote on next week. That's HR 2, it's the Moving Forward Act, of which the Ways and Means Committee, again, has significant pieces. Our pieces are really centered in the bond financing world and green energy world. And we've included tools like reinstating advanced refunding bonds, which I think will be critically important to states and localities to go ahead and issue new refinance bonds at the new extraordinary low interest rates. We have a reinstatement of Build America bonds, which proved extraordinarily popular during the Great Recession in 2009. We got them back on a permanent basis. We have a tremendous expansion and an investment in low-income housing through the low-income housing tax credit. But we have heard from so many people that this is a critical portion of our population, that when housing needs come first and foremost, it's often a very difficult need to meet. And then finally, in HEROES, in the bill that already passed, we did include state and local tax relief via a reinstatement of the full SALT deduction. That is the uncapped SALT deduction. Our members feel strongly that this is a provision that is vitally helpful to localities and states to ensure they manage their financing needs without sticking the burden on their taxpayers that have to pay it and not actually, essentially be double taxed on certain amounts of their income. So very briefly, where we are now, the House has passed HEROES. We're looking at HR 2 next week. The Senate has not acted on HEROES, but it feels like kind of the situation changes daily. I think there's a much greater attention being paid right now, both on the part of the Senate majority and on the part of the administration, to the need for additional stimulus, additional relief, and especially an eye to state and local governments. I can assure you that the Democratic members of Ways and Means certainly do not want to see any state or locality go bankrupt. And I think that the majority members in the Senate are starting to hear that message from their local electeds. I do think July is a fair time to talk about negotiations and we can move forward. I always say perhaps mid-July, perhaps late July. These things are more of an art than a science. But our members stand ready to go ahead and move forward on those negotiations and produce important and good product that we hope can benefit all Americans. With that, I just want to go ahead and close and say it is, again, my pleasure to join you today. And we are so happy to continue to work with the Conference of Mayors. And we hope that you'll continue to be a resource to us and reach out to us as you identify particular needs and as the Ways and Means Committee can be helpful. Thank you.
Aruna, thank you so much. Really appreciate this valuable information. We look forward to seeing you a lot in the next few weeks. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to turn to the past president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and former Oklahoma City Mayor, Mick Cornutt. And of course, he is also author of a great book, The Next American City, The Big Promise of Our Mid-Size Metros. And Mick will discuss the big promise of mid-size metros. Mick, glad to have you here.
Mute.
How's that? Is that better?
Better, a lot better.
You'll never know all the great material I just disclosed to you. Because you couldn't hear me. Tom, good to see you. Good to see all of them.
Good to see you, Mayor.
Enjoyed listening to the conversations. I got to say, I don't miss a lot of the things you all are dealing with, but I'm proud to see all the mayors taking appropriate actions across the country. As Mayor Williams mentioned, I spent much of my time out of office traveling and speaking on my book. This is a shameless plug for The Next American City. And I was actually traveling through Moscow and Abu Dhabi in January, February, and into March when they started shutting down airports. And I'm fortunate I got back to the States just in time. But those cities in that part of the world are trying to westernize as fast as possible. So I think mayors in the United States should know that mayors around the world are now trying to, I'll use the term Americanize, their cities, but what they're really trying to do is create places where people want to live. They're building more parks, they're building more pedestrian friendly infrastructure, and some of these in places where health has not been a very high priority in the past. And so a lot of the techniques that mayors have been using in the United States now for decades are now starting to sprinkle through the world. But I think we all realize now that a lot of habits are changing, and I think we're all wondering what's it going to look like on the other side of this virus. We're seeing more and more people working from home. Cities have spent tens and hundreds of millions of dollars creating public spaces so people can gather. I mean, for years we've been talking about the efficiency of density. And now we're talking about the wisdom of spreading apart, and so I don't think any of us know what these trends are going to look like 6 months from now or a year from now, and I think the smart thing to do is to wait it out and see where this thing lands before we start making huge changes to our infrastructure investments. Mayors over just the last 6 months have dealt with crisis that haven't seen in decades, and now I know weighing on a lot of mayors' laps is the largest budget issue that you've ever faced in your time, and hopefully the federal government will come through one more time. I think the federal government's prompt actions so far have probably saved our economy, and so I think they should be praised for what they've done, but I think they do need to realize that local governments aren't going to make it if they don't get more money. I was thrilled to hear Mayor de Blasio say that public transit numbers are up in New York City. I think that's a really good sign. Public transit has to be helped in city after city. And when the fare box is down to a small fraction of what it used to be, it makes it even more and more difficult. And I think, so far the early studies aren't showing that public transit has been a way that the virus has been spreading, although it kind of makes sense. If you're crowding people together, that's probably not smart, especially in some of these cities that are dealing with a lot of setbacks. I did want to talk about one new technology that I've run across that mayors might want to think about. There's a company that has basically recreated the HVAC system at the molecular level, and they've made a transition from convection to what's called diffusion. They're actually working at the molecular level to make a cleaner air supply, and an air supply that's a fraction of the cost. And they're willing to put this system into public buildings like a city hall or something like that, absolutely free. And you'll save money on operations going forward. So it is brand new technology, but I can get you more information about it if you'd like. And one final word on my account, because I know we're rushed for time. The stock market is doing well again, and there are going to be people in your community with capital gains, And we need to remind them to put that into empowerment zones in your city and in other cities. I think sometimes we forget that this great tool is still sitting there right in front of us. So I hope everyone will think about those and continue to get people to invest in their cities. And if there are any questions, I'll hang on. But otherwise, just good to see you all again, and I wish you all well.
Thank you, Mick. Really appreciate what you have done in the past and what you continue to do to help our cities. Thank you very much.
You bet, Mayor Williams.
Okay, next we'll turn to, and by the way, we'll have time for questions here after the next speaker. And that is the research lead for JP Morgan Chase. We're honored to have Kai Mack. And Mr. Mack will discuss a newly released report on the impact of COVID-19 on small business. Mr. Mack?
Thank you. This is actually Chief, but thank you for having me.
Mrs. Mack, all right.
But thank you for having me. Yes, so just today, the JP Morgan Chase Institute released new research on the small business financial health during the onset of COVID-19. So this covers the period through April 2020. So we use a de-identified sample of 1.3 million small businesses nationwide, and their transactions from their checking accounts to see kind of their cash balances, their estimates of revenue and expenses. So these are really the quintessential local businesses in your communities. These are dry cleaners, dentists, independent restaurants that we see. So we look at these three measures, their balances, revenues, and expenses, and compare them to the same time last year. So overall, what we're seeing is that, for the typical small business, their cash balances were down almost 13% in April relative to where they were last year. And for revenues, what we're seeing was that they were down about 50% at their lowest point. And now there is some recovery going on, but it hasn't fully recovered clearly. So obviously there's been a wide impact across all small businesses. However, we do see kind of a wide variation of impact across different metro areas, across different industries, and also by owner demographics. So let me just go through each one very quickly. For metro areas, we look at 16 metro areas where we have a large presence, and so some cities, such as Atlanta, actually was much harder hit. So their cash balances were down, more than 20% relative to where they were last year. Las Vegas also was hit very hard, as well as New York and Orlando. On the other hand, cities like Seattle and Indianapolis actually appear to have recovered in terms of their cash balances relative to last year. Across industries, you are probably not surprised to hear that some industries, such as restaurants and personal services, those have been hit really hard in this pandemic. So these are personal services are things like salons, dry cleaners. There we're seeing that their revenues are down 80% relative to where they were last year. And some industries that have been doing a little bit better are health services. Also real estate has been doing better than most other industries. So, and our last cut is by owner demographics. So for a subset of 95,000 firms in our sample, these are firms that are in Florida, Georgia, and Louisiana. We have information about the owner race. So we get these through voter registration records. Now there are 8 states that collect race as part of voter registration and make this data available to the public. So 3 of those states, Florida, Georgia, and Louisiana, are in the Chase footprint as of 2018. So those are states in which we have some information on race, and we have a forthcoming report that goes into more depth about these data and looking at small business outcomes on that. So I won't go into detail there, However, we did want to provide some insight about how minority-owned firms are doing during this pandemic. And in particular, what we're seeing is that Black-owned firms in particular, their cash balances have been really hard hit. So their cash balances have been down 26% for Black-owned businesses compared to the 13% that was across all businesses nationwide. Also, we see that for Asian-owned businesses, although they are not a large segment in those 3 states, their revenues are down about 60% relative to where they were last year. So just to conclude, we have new research. It's on our website. It's available for free to the public. It has all of these results and more, and we hope you check it out. Obviously, small businesses have been hit really hard in this pandemic and with the lockdowns. However, there's also a very wide variation in what the impact has been and the magnitude based on the different metro areas, different industries, and different owner demographics.
Thank you, Ms. Mack. Really appreciate that report. So now that we've heard from all of our speakers, we'd like to open it up for questions. And if anyone has a question, if you can raise your hand, and then I'll ask for help there, because I may not be able to see everyone there with it. But now love to open it up for questions. Well, I have a question for Mick. Mick, has the diffusion system that you're talking about there on air cooling, has it been installed in many buildings yet?
It has on the other side of the world. It's in the UAE. I've been in a place called Masdar, which is kind of a futuristic energy utopia, and they're pulling water out of air and creating it in liquid form, and they're also using this molecular kinetic energy to move air molecules around. And this is virus-free, it's odor-free, and it operates at about 30% of the standard air conditioning system in the United States. So it is revolutionary. And they're just now introducing it into the United States. But it's been used in theaters, airports, office buildings, with extraordinary results so far, but all of that's been in the Eastern Hemisphere.
Great. Mick, you're traveling, I see now, promoting the book, but share with us about your plans, and do you have those plans yet on what's the next chapter for Mick Cornett?
Well, just I do a little consulting work and travel and speak. And answer the phone and people trying to get me back in public office. So we'll see how that goes. When I lost the governor's race, I told people that it was probably the last time they'd ever see me on a ballot. But we'll see. They haven't quit calling, and there's some races opening up. So we'll see. But I'm enjoying just getting back to private sector life, and I'm staying involved in the community, and Mayor Holt keeps me informed about what's going on. So I'm enjoying life after being mayor.
Great. Any other
Mr. Chairman,
questions?
just reminding all that Mayor Cornett was a great president of this organization. It's good to see him today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Tom. And Terry says hello.
Carlotta just came in and saw you. She said hello too.
Okay, good.
Family.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, hearing no other questions, then we'll conclude our meeting. And again, I want to thank all of our speakers for an outstanding job in sharing very important information that I hope that will help each of our cities as we look for effective ways to reopen and to revive our communities. I also want to thank each of you for tuning in to our first virtual meeting, and I hope that we don't have to have one in the winter. I look forward to seeing all of you, hopefully at our next in-person meeting there at our winter meeting scheduled for Washington, D.C. in January 2021. Also, I'm very serious about needing all of your help here as we move forward on the next CARES Act and supplying great information and discussion with our congressmen and senators there as we move forward to rebound our economy. Is there any other new business to come before the committee? Mayor Keller, do you have something to say?
All set, just ready for that motion to adjourn. Good job.
All right, so we've got a motion to adjourn from Mayor Keller. So hearing no other business, then this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you, Mayor Keller. Appreciate each one of you. Thank you, Mayor Joins. Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much to Larry. David, thank you too. Appreciate it greatly. Thank you, Miss Mack.